Hey there, Bat fans. I'm Anthony Mango, and welcome back to The Batman, a nighttime story. 100 records from the Wayne Foundation archives. Just in case you are brand new to the Batman Blueprint, be sure to go back and check out all the videos prior to this one in this series on YouTube, starting with the breakdown of what the Blueprint project itself is all about. That way you can understand not only how the Blueprint project works as far as condensing things and making it the best version of the character possible from all the adaptations that are out there, but also the differences between the projects within the Blueprint project and how something like Absolute Power Rangers, A Mighty Morphin Epic is 12 full-length feature film scripts and 2 short films, whereas the Batman Blueprint and the Batman A Nighttime Story is 100 records or 100 stories. So as I've stated before in the other videos, this YouTube series is focusing on breaking down the overall general narratives of the first 5 chapters of that 100-part epic. And that means that since we are on chapter 5, that this is the conclusion of those teasers. And I'm setting the limit at just the 5 chapters because I don't want to spoil the other 95 and the full story from start to finish, because this is not meant, as I've said before, to just be a series of YouTube videos. These videos on YouTube are pitches. They are meant to whet the appetite of everybody, to get you interested in finding out what happens next, and to explain the project in better detail. So that way, whether it's something like the Batman Blueprint and the executives over at DC, or the Spider-Man Blueprint and the executives at Marvel, and Disney with Star Wars, Eon with James Bond, whatever it might be, I want them to be excited about this, and I want them to want to develop it further and to work with me in making this a cartoon series, a graphic novel series, film series, whatever it might be. And in order for that to happen, I need your help in spreading the word about all this. It is positively instrumental that you share these videos on social media via Facebook, or post on different subreddits and message boards, or to go on Twitter and to retweet these videos. In particular, use the hashtags Batman Blueprint and Higher Mango DC Comics. I always think that that's kind of silly, but maybe it works. I don't know. Be sure to tweet at accounts like DC Official and at Batman and at James Gunn, but don't limit yourself there either. Tweet at comic book artists or actors, directors, producers, even other YouTube channels and content creators and cosplayers, and anybody in this fan community that would be interested in Batman. Every single share is helpful, and I'm only one man, so me putting this out there isn't enough for it to go viral. That's where you step in. Also, be sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel and hit the like button on this video, which only takes a split second, and it really truly helps out more than you would think. Trust me, this algorithm is nuts here on YouTube. And as Batman would say, you want to get nuts? Let's get nuts. And if you would like to directly and monetarily sponsor this kind of content in the future, more of the Batman Blueprint or more of the other parts of the Blueprint project, different series here from Captain America to Terminator or whatever it might be, then be sure to hit up the PayPal button at the bottom of fanboysanonymous.com and subscribe to the Patreon over at patreon.com/fanboysanonymous. With all that stuff out of the way, we are on chapter 5 with this video, which means that if you are indeed brand new to this, and you have not checked out chapters 1 through 4, you're going to want to go back and check them out, and that way you can have an understanding of where the story's been leading and where we're picking up with chapter 5. Those previous chapters of volume 1, which is entitled Gotham Guardian, are as follows. Chapter 1 is called Why Do We Fall?, detailing the time around the murders of Thomas and Martha Wayne. Chapter 2 is The Big Chill, exploring Bruce's immediate fallout from losing his parents and his adolescent years up until the point that he's 18 and he runs away from Gotham after nearly shooting Joe Chill. Chapter 3 is Guilt Trip, where Bruce travels the world learning from various teachers and acquiring lessons and skills that he's going to use in the future to fight crime. And Chapter 4, Head of the Demon, was the last part where Bruce was training under the League of Shadows, fell in love with Talia al Ghul, and drew a firm line in the sand between Ra's al Ghul's corrupt way to make the world a better place and Bruce's morality and plans to become a masked vigilante and save Gotham City. That takes us to the 5th section of Volume 1, which is Chapter 5, entitled Bat Out of Hell. So without further ado, let's continue Bruce Wayne's journey toward becoming the Batman. Enjoy. As we left off, Bruce Wayne has abandoned the League of Shadows and is suffering from total heartbreak from Talia al Ghul, not knowing that she is pregnant with his future son, Damian. But what Bruce does know is how he wants the next phase of the mission to be, and how he wants to fight this war on crime within Gotham City. And he's ready to get started. So he's reached out to Alfred, received a money transfer, traveled back to Italy, and given a huge tip to the people in the cafe in Florence, probably something like $1 million, and he has started navigating his way through some back roads to get back into America, but in secret. We can skip all the technicalities of how he's going to do that because it really isn't all that important, and just get to the point where he is going to be meeting up with Alfred on a private jet. This is all completely off the record. There are no flight logs for this trip because Captain Dale, his personal pilot, she's been paid very well to keep this on the down low. Nobody can know that Bruce is heading back to Gotham or any information about where he was coming from. This is just between Bruce and Alfred, who is leaving town under the guise that he's going on vacation. And there are all sorts of emotions that are stirring because it's been 8 years since they've seen each other in person. And Bruce has grown up and changed quite a bit since the last time that they were together. But amid all the anxiety and the nervousness, the one emotion that Alfred is feeling way more than any others is excitement. He's eager to see his surrogate son again. So he's put on his finest suit. But Bruce, on the other hand, he is wearing these scroungy, torn clothes. He has this full unkempt beard and this long, messy hair. And he's just covered in grit and grime from all the travel and looking totally disheveled. As Bruce is approaching the jet, they spot each other from the distance, and they just can't help but to smile. There's comfort in this familiar face, and they can see that the other one's okay. And then, of course, Alfred's snarky nature immediately comes out, because the first thing that he says to him is, "Master Wayne, you're looking rather fashionable, apart from all the mud." So Bruce gets on the plane, gets himself all cleaned up, takes a proper shower and all. But he doesn't bother to shave off the beard or to trim his hair or to put on the suit that Alfred has laid out for him. He just takes some casual clothes and throws those on. And when he steps out, Alfred, kind of disapprovingly and in his, again, trademark snarky nature, just says, "Oh, we're keeping all the hair, I see." And Bruce explains that the reason why is because this is a lot easier for him to blend in. He doesn't want to be recognized. And the perception of a rich guy like Bruce Wayne is that he's got these fancy clothes and he's got a clean cut, proper hairstyle and all. And Bruce doesn't have any plans to announce his return anytime soon, at least not immediately. He doesn't even know if he wants the world to know that he's back at all. And there are a couple of reasons why. Emotionally, it's going to take a huge toll on Bruce to just be back in Gotham in general. And he is far from the spokesperson of good mental health, but even he can recognize that it would do him some good to have an adjustment period and to not dive so deep into just stepping off the jet and being hounded by a mob of paparazzi. He wants to reacclimate himself, get himself situated again, and tie up some loose ends before any of that madness begins. And he also wants to put some plans in motion that are going to be a lot less suspicious if nobody knows that he's in town. So Alfred asks in so many words, "Master Wayne, what the hell is your plan?" Bruce is 26 years old. He is 10 years removed from when Alfred sat him down on his 16th birthday and said, you really got to start planning your future and trying to figure out what role you want to play in this world. And now that Bruce has traveled around and he's learned what he's learned and they're in a safe spot where they can actually communicate and not worry about their phone messages being traced or their computer messages being tracked or anything, Bruce can tell him that his answer to all of this is the mission. And effectively, there's only one real goal here: save Gotham City and be an example to others. And Alfred knows that these are big shoes to fill to try to follow in the footsteps of Bruce's parents. But Thomas and Martha were great examples, and if he's going to pattern himself off of anybody, there are few, if any, examples that are better than those two to strive to match. Bruce says, well, yes and no. He's learned by now that he needs to make himself more than just a man. People are vulnerable, They're just flesh and blood. You know, they can be ignored or destroyed. Mom is dead. Dad is dead. Bruce is dead inside. But as a symbol, he could be incorruptible, he could be everlasting, immortal, and people need dramatic examples to shake them out of apathy, and he just can't do that solely as Bruce Wayne. So then, who are you going to be? And then we have one of those smash cuts where, for the emphasis of a joke, we can cut away, then we can cut back, and the conversation's been going this whole time. And Alfred just says, "Bats? Why bats, Master Wayne?" Bruce says, "Bats frighten me. Criminals are a terror. They think that they are the heart of the night and that they own it. They're comfortable in the shadows. So I must disguise my terror as an omen that strikes fear back into them. Why would you dress up like a bat instead of just wearing a normal mask?" Well, here's where I deviate from some of the other adaptations that normally have Bruce dressing up in normal gear when he's in Gotham, and then eventually fashioning the whole Batman persona. You know, the bat crashes through the window or anything. We already took care of that. All that stuff of Bruce wearing like a regular balaclava, in the Batman blueprint, he's sporting that not in Gotham, but when he's doing all those missions for Henry Ducard and the League of Shadows and such, for those, he doesn't have the Batman cowl and all, and he's just a ninja, you know, just some guy in a ski mask or whatever. But nobody was ever afraid of him, or at least not enough to give him a distinct advantage. Since criminals all wear basic face coverings and such when they're committing crimes, there's no real difference between they and Bruce, and he needs to separate himself from them as much as possible. Otherwise, what's to stop a big group of people from just pointing their semi-automatics at him, shooting him, and calling it a day? You know, there's nothing scary about another guy. He wants to scare them to the point that they are afraid to even think about committing a crime, because if they do, the Bat is going to get them. Bruce wants to carry over all the mysticism of the Talia al Ghul name, but forge his own identity. So Bruce and Alfred go on to discuss things like how the Bat persona was forged through the fear trials and the Mask of Tengu and all the training and such, but also that the game plan is that this secret identity is put in place to protect both himself and people like Alfred from any kind of retaliation. But Alfred says he hates to ask, but he has to. Is Bruce planning to kill Joe Chill? Bruce emphatically says no. No killing, ever. That's the rule. That's where the line is drawn. If you kill a killer, the number of killers stays the same. Alfred is already concerned, rightfully so, that he doesn't want the Bat persona to completely take over. Just please do not lose yourself to this entirely, like I've seen so many people do in the Secret Service. Always remember that deep down, inside, you are a Wayne. And Bruce says, it's not who I am underneath, but what I do that defines me. My parents gave their lives for this city, and I will honor their legacy by doing the same, even if a good death is hard to come by. And it's a two-pronged approach. Well, more than two angles, but there are two main driving forces. Thomas and Martha were very charitable, and they would have given a lot more to Gotham for decades to come in all sorts of different ways. But they were cut short, and Bruce has been slacking on those contributions for the past 18 years. You know, he has been away from Gotham for so long, and then, of course, before that, he was just a kid, so he wasn't really taking part in those kind of processes. And he wants to fill in the gaps for not just making up for lost time for himself, but also for the missing void of his parents, who should still be around. You know, if they were still alive, somebody like Martha would be running a bunch of charity foundations, or Thomas would be directly saving lives in the hospital. Bruce is fighting for 3 people now, and he has a lot of ground to make up. Alfred says that's a lot of guilt to be carrying. And Bruce says, I am guilt. So one aspect of this is that Bruce is going to purify Gotham by going through the Wayne Foundation and taking back control of Wayne Enterprises. And there he's going to do all sorts of things like fix the city's infrastructure and provide affordable housing and so on. And if anybody gets in the way of that, well, then the Bat is going to be there to directly fight crime with his fists and clean up the streets crook by crook. The courts and the police are clearly just not capable of doing what needs to be done. And even though Alfred is not entirely on board with all of this, Bruce knows that Alfred's time in the Secret Service and all, being a vigilante isn't too foreign of a concept. But Alfred also says that this isn't what he imagined Bruce's life would become. This whole time that Bruce has been gone, Alfred had been hoping that out of the blue someday, Bruce would message him saying he had met some beautiful woman and he decided to settle down, and that he had left Gotham to leave behind all that tragedy. Bruce, feeling the sting of breaking up with Talia, just sulks a little bit and says, "Can't always get what you want." And Alfred tries to cheer him up. He says, "You've gone to hell and back to get what you wanted. That has to mean something." And Bruce just says, "I never left hell." Be it Gotham itself or the perpetual state of dismay and agony that Bruce is always in, he's right. Bruce in that private jet is re-entering the mouth of hell. But what is Gotham City like these days, and what is it compared to when he left? Well, unfortunately, nothing is better. In fact, not much has changed at all, and if it has changed, it's changed for the worse. In the real world, take a modern city like New York or Chicago and compare what it looks like now to 8 years ago. You would see things like more phone charging stations for people to use, and you might see like a different Metro card system that's a more efficient way for public transportation, but not in Gotham. Those quality of life improvements that serve no purpose other than to just help the average citizen, they're constantly overlooked, and they rarely ever actually go through. For instance, the government will give a grant to Gotham for, say, improving its monorail track system, and then oops, that money went towards the cheapest labor possible, and then the rest of it was pocketed, and it's now lining the pockets of corrupt politicians. And that's if anything happens at all. Again, if you're looking for the rigged system, just look in our real world. You know how many millions of dollars have been given to cable companies to make fiber optics more abundantly available? And you know how many of them actually followed through with it? It seems like every time that these cable companies are given these big payouts, the money just sort of evaporates, and none of these cable lines are ever upgraded or expanded on. And that's just one example of the reality of corruption and corporations and government from us. So imagine how a fictional Gotham, where things are more transparently worse, how that works. So the functionality of the city itself is crumbling. The bridges are cracked and the roads need fixing. But thankfully, the architecture of Gotham, these Gothic-style buildings with these gargoyles on them, that's all super old. These solid stone masterpieces that were built centuries ago, they are much better at withstanding the test of time than these cheap construction projects that are, basically building houses out of plywood and all. It would take quite an earthquake to take down Gotham City. Makes you think. So as per usual, the rich can properly invest into having well-made modern buildings constructed, or to purchase these higher quality older buildings. But the average person is dealing with the misery of landlords that are charging rent through the roof for terrible living conditions. And the more that the government tries to give financial aid to Gotham, and the more that they see that they are not fixing stuff, but there's just no return on the investment, the less that the government is willing to give money, and they just see it as being flushed down the toilet, or worse, that it's going to the criminals. So Gotham's credibility is in the shitter, and the reputation continues to decline, meaning that less and less money comes into the city because the poverty gap keeps getting bigger and bigger over time, and then that makes Gotham a worse place to live, and then that makes it to where people don't want to go there, and it's just compounding worse and worse as time is going on. And there are no public figures that can get the momentum rolling for actually fixing the city the way that Thomas and Martha used to. Sure, the rich folk have these bullshit charity auctions and such once in a while, but Everything is a meaningless dog and pony show. The money never goes to the people that are in need. It's all just an excuse to post on social media for clout and to have a fancy party for fun and to rub elbows with the famous people and the future business contacts that might be there. Hollow gestures at best. The poor have it worse than when Bruce left. And the rich, like Carmine Falcone, they just keep amassing power every day and they are just living better than ever. As far as the crime syndicates go, things are dangerously efficient and simultaneously in an erratic, constant state of flux. You can map out the city with a color key of which streets are owned by which gangs at any given moment, but who's to say it's not going to change leadership within a week, because these smaller gangs, Falcone's got a bigger piece of the pie. They're fighting for the scraps. So they're always competing with each other of who can take one more street. And at any given moment, the turf can change with one big group assassination. For instance, if you head over to Chinatown and you turn left or right, then are the Jade Leopards in charge here, or the Jade Tigers, or the Black Clouds, or the Seven Steel Cobras, or the Lucky Hen Triad? Ultimately, everything continues to funnel back to Carmine Falcone. He is in the most control, he has the most pull over everybody, he's at the top of the top. But even he is engaged in a cold war. See, he and Sal Maroni never liked each other. They have always been rivals. But they decided that neither of them could take control over everything by themselves. So they forged a tenuous alliance when Bruce was a kid. That's how they were able to take out the 5 families of the Cosa Nostra and the offshoot groups. They killed a lot of people, they intimidated a lot of people, and they made them all go underneath them. But because Falcone was in the better position, he is the #1 guy. Maroni has always been #2, and Maroni, of course, does not want to be #2. So that gap between the two of them over these past 18 years, that's been widening even more. Nearly 20 years of being the #2 guy is really starting to get to Maroni. More and more, Maroni's guys are wondering, when is Sal just going to order the hit and, make a move and fully usurp Falcone and take his spot on the throne? But still, it isn't quite time to make that move yet. Falcone is the de facto #1A, and Maroni knows that being #1B is a better position than starting a war that he can't quite finish. He needs to wait until something happens that disrupts the natural flow of things, and puts him in the position where he is the guy that everybody's looking to for leadership. The traditional ways of fighting these injustices are all flawed. The Gotham City Police Department is a mixture of corrupt cops that are paid to look in the opposite direction for a lot of things, or they're just actively engaging in criminal activities. And then the good cops, there are fewer and farther between as each day goes by, and they are largely incapable of making any real change. If somebody ruffles enough feathers, they're usually beaten into submission, or worse, taken out of the equation. The courts are powerless, same situation. If you're not paid off or scared into compliance, then you tend not to last long in any kind of real position of power. Even the media is largely blacked out. You're not going to find many investigative reporters that are willing to put their lives on the line for a scoop in, hey, that judge had some faulty bank records, and that kind of points to a bribe. So a lot of the press is just bouncing between fear-mongering to get people to tune into the show, and then fluff pieces that are trying to give off the impression of, everything's okay, don't you just love Gotham City? Isn't there so much to do here? Oh my god, do you see who won the crown for this year's Ice Princess? Isn't she so beautiful? It's been a while since they've had a Wayne scandal to sink their teeth into for the gossip section, and Bruce knows that the moment he shows his face, this is going to dominate the media coverage. And he's not quite ready for that onslaught just yet. So Bruce gets back to Gotham and he steps foot on the grounds of Wayne Manor for the first time in nearly a decade, and he immediately remembers how cold and lifeless everything is. Now, there isn't a speck of dust in the place. Alfred's maintained everything in pristine form, but the wounds are still there, and it's time to start healing them, or as best as Bruce can, which, isn't saying much. Alfred, as a good host and a butler, offers to make some food for Bruce and get him all settled in. And by the time that the food is ready to go, Bruce is nowhere to be found. He's actually at the family mausoleum, taking in the burial plots and the tombstones of his parents and his ancestors. Bruce can sense Alfred's footsteps from behind him, and he says, "How did you know that I would be here?" And Alfred says, "I don't care how long you've been gone and how much you've changed, I still know who you are, Master Bruce." Here they have another discussion. Bruce asks Alfred if he thinks that his parents would be ashamed of him or proud. And Alfred says, if Bruce didn't take one more step of this journey, he just called an end to it right now, then he knows that Thomas and Martha would still look down upon him and smile. And Bruce says he can't believe that, just not yet at least. Everybody buried here has a legacy to their name that they've come to be known for, be it settling roots in Gotham, or making the family fortune, or in the case of his parents, their altruism. By the time that he is in his own grave, he is going to make sure that he's earned it. Alfred says, well, first things first, your dinner is getting cold, so let's attend to that. You've earned a hot, homemade meal. Bruce says, I'll be right behind you, but just give me a few more minutes. And Alfred says, as you wish, Master Wayne. And by the way, when you're ready to visit the other memorial, let me know and I'll bring the car around. That's because Alfred knows that as hard as it is for Bruce to be in front of the tombstones right now, he knows it's going to be even more difficult when Bruce goes to Park Row, and he visits the place where Thomas and Martha were shot, and he does the ritual that he used to do with the roses and all. But more on that later. So while Bruce is still somewhat meditating at the gravesite, a lot of thoughts swell in his mind about everything from the shootings to the Joe Chill trial and his journey over the past 18 years. And he explains in the Wayne Foundation archives records via voiceover narration that one of the ideas that was wrestling in his mind was about the Lazarus Pit. The temptation is certainly there to just dig up their graves and place their corpses in one of those pools and then have his parents back, but he's not going to do that for a number of different reasons. First off, it just doesn't work that way. They've been dead for too long, and there are limitations to what a Lazarus Pit can do. You know, you can only really reanimate somebody if their body is still warm. And the further the decay, the harder it is to reanimate them. That's one of the reasons why somebody like Melisande or Sora wasn't able to be brought back. And Nissa Rotko, for example, she was blown to bits in that car bombing. And what would be left to put in there? You can't just put a skull and grow a whole human being. And Bruce also knows what these chemicals do to people. He wouldn't want to bring his parents back and have them be completely insane. That wouldn't be his parents. Even still, the public just wouldn't accept it. There is no real excuse or plausible explanation for their return. He can't just keep them hidden away as his pet zombies. They've been gone for 20 years. He can't just say that they faked their deaths and that they, abandoned Gotham, because that ruins their legacy. And in their death, they've become martyrs for the city. And there's power to that he can't take away. So as much as he wants them back, it just isn't in the cards, and it would be selfish for him to even try. As expected, later on in the evening, Bruce has trouble sleeping. So he looks out his window at the grounds below, and his eyes focus on the section that houses the well that he fell down as a child. The next morning, Alfred goes to wake Bruce up, but he sees that Bruce is already going about some business. He's gathering tools from the shed in the garage, so he asks what he's doing, and Bruce says he's going to put an old nightmare to bed. Alfred makes a snide comment about getting a proper night's rest, but that's not at all what this is about. Instead, Bruce has gathered some rope and some climbing gear, and he has taken the wooden planks off the well entrance that were blocking it. He's decided to go down it. Alfred stands by as Bruce slowly descends into the darkness, on his own accord this time, rather than falling in as a helpless and scared child. Instead of fear on his face, there's a look of determination. And Bruce starts to explore, and he finds a bigger opening which leads to a massive underground cavern. Bruce needs to get a better look at his surroundings, so he needs to turn on his flashlight. And the moment that he ignites that switch, he gets engulfed by a huge swarm of bats, just like in the hallucination fear trials of the League of Shadows. But he's done so many doses of that, and he has gone through so much exposure therapy that he's leveled up. There is no twitching or swatting away at the bats or screaming for help. He just closes his eyes and he embraces them. And like a beekeeper being surrounded by a swarming colony, there is no more fear. He has conquered this albatross, and he has descended even further into hell, where the bats have christened him one of their own. And when Bruce reascends to the surface, and he doesn't have a scratch on him, he has truly become a bat out of hell. One of the multiple times that that title is going to come into play for this chapter. Time for a little backstory on how the Bat Cave is going to work in my blueprint. I like my Wayne Manor to be, surprise surprise, a combination of different things that we've seen in various adaptations. To me, it's about form and function. And I prefer for it to be on the outskirts of the city, at least the main skyscraper section of it, but not so much that it would call into question, why isn't he just protecting, the next city over? Now, as a New Jersey native, I will always defend Gotham being a part of that, but I still have to concede that in this universe, New York City and Gotham City are kind of one and the same, basically like an alternate reality. So imagine if you can reshape parts and take something like the Palisades region and move it just off of Manhattan and put it around like Queens or Brooklyn or something. The point is, I like Wayne Manor to have access to a cliffside and a waterfall and a lakefront area with a little guest house like in Batman v Superman, because the way that I see it, the water can be used to hide stuff underneath it, kind of like Groom Lake is to Area 51. Bruce is also going to have a secondary headquarters, which is a penthouse deep in the city that's located near Wayne Tower. And Wayne Tower is effectively the dead center of Gotham City, both geologically on a map, and also just the way that the town revolves around the Waynes, literally and metaphorically. The monorail system wraps around it and such, you can kind of treat it as like the Empire State Building. Bruce is also going to be buying up some property and using these different caches and garages and safe houses as these different backup storage units for medical supplies and weaponry and spare costumes and such. But the central base of operations is always going to remain Wayne Manor. There's no place like home, quite literally. And at 1007 Mountain Drive, which I like better than 224 Park Drive, this place is a fortress, and even more so than the rest of Gotham's architecture, it is super, super old. When first settling on that area, the caves underneath this were a mine shaft, and eventually they were deemed not worthy of excavating anymore, and the whole idea of it was condemned. But there aren't really any public records of any of this, because they wanted to protect their investment, and let's face it, archives weren't just as much of a thing back then. And much like how the Lazarus Pit has a lot of its origins lost to the history books, the caves under Wayne Manor have many stories to tell, and these are stories that only a select few in any generation know about. So even Bruce isn't aware of a lot of this information at first, but Thomas and Martha told Alfred, so he can fill Bruce in on the backstory. With the mine shaft in the years that followed, structural foundations were put in place. And this is also because something else not in the record books is that the caves were used as passages to transport slaves as part of the Underground Railroad. I want to establish that it's in the Wayne family blood to help people. And I also want to excuse that, look, it's just not feasible for Bruce to excavate a whole cave on his own, so I want this to be about 60-75% already done by the time he comes around, so he just basically has to upgrade it, add some electrical equipment and really punch up the place. After the mine shaft era and the Civil War era, some parts of this were built into a bomb shelter. Again, everything in secret and very excusable and rational. Why wouldn't a billionaire family have a fallout panic room? Of course they would. So Bruce and Alfred start sketching out some ideas of how to make this the Bat Cave. And I'm actually going to spoil something that happens in chapter 6 and 7 and so on, but I figured you might as well know about it now. So Bruce goes through some back channels through Wayne Enterprises to outsource a workforce from other countries, and he does all sorts of different tactics to confuse them. He gets them to sign NDAs, he blindfolds them and flies them to different countries, and he doesn't unblindfold them until they're underground, so they don't know where they are. They never deal with Bruce, so they can't recognize him. and he tells them that they are going to be working on a secret government facility. Now, think of it this way. Somebody built the underground bunkers in Camp David that I'm sure are there, and something like Dugway Proving Grounds, and Area 51, I already mentioned that. So think of it kind of like that. You know, it's absolutely ridiculous to think that Bruce and Alfred by themselves are excavating this cave, and they're just, you know, sitting there with some hand chisels and everything. It's absurd. Speaking of ridiculous, and I'm going to catch some flack for this, the big penny and the dinosaur, the big playing card, they're not going to be here either. The dinosaur is going to be a scarecrow hallucination at some point. The big penny is going to be a statue inside of Wayne Enterprises to symbolize the first penny that they ever earned as a company. There's no museum in the Batcave, or at least not yet. I don't really want to spoil too much, and I'm already getting sidetracked as it is, but believe me, I could talk about the secret entranceways and the passages to get to the Batcave and all. I have tons of notes and references that I have in mind. So ignoring all the technical stuff, the overall point of this section of Chapter 5 is that Bruce has overcome the demons underneath his home. And he's visited the gravesite, but Alfred's right. He needs to go to Crime Alley. Remember that for 10 years, from age 8 all the way up until he fled Gotham, every year on the anniversary of his parents' death, Bruce would go visit the site of their shooting, Park Row, which has been nicknamed the moniker of Crime Alley since their deaths. And he would place down 2 roses, one to symbolize Thomas and one to symbolize Martha. And every time that he used to do that, Bruce would try in any way he could to feel their presence and connect with their spirits in some fashion, but all he would ever feel is horrifically sad, and he would just break down and not be able to handle it. Now, Bruce hasn't been there in 8 years since he's been traveling the world, and even though it's not the anniversary of their death, he is long overdue for a visit. This is also going to test the skills that he learned from Henry Ducard about how to blend in while out in public. You know, he's been doing that in America and elsewhere, but never in Gotham and never at that particular scene. And he's able to pull it off, partially because he's been gone for so long that nobody would assume that Bruce Wayne is back, partially because he's got the long hair and the scruffy beard, and partially because he's doing these self-camouflage tactics and making sure that he doesn't stand out in the crowd. And of course, he's an emotional wreck, but he's able to keep his composure better than ever before. Call it bottling it up or disassociation. He's not a mess on the street like what he used to be. And since he's learned so much more about spirituality through Taoism and meditation and becoming one with nature and the revelations of the Lazarus pit and everything, Bruce has the ability to make the tiniest fraction of peace with their passing, but only really in the sense that he says he's going to dedicate and devote every minute of his life to the mission on their behalf. Something else that I'll spoil for you that happens in Chapter 6 and onward is that Bruce is going to set up a clinic here. It's called the T&M Memorial Clinic. It's a version of the Thomas Wayne Memorial Clinic. It's going to be on Park Row, and he's going to give the head position to Leslie Tompkins. This is going to help people out in 2 ways. Obviously, Thomas was a doctor, so there is the pure medical side of things. But also, there's the mental health side of things, with programs to honor Martha's struggles with depression. There will be resources for the arts, because Martha was a painter, and drug abuse programs, and tolerance groups, and there's the Family Finders organization, which helps reunite lost families and find lost people. There's soup kitchens, educational services for people with learning disabilities. There's basically this idea in mind that the place of their death is going to change into a place where humanitarian contributions that Thomas and Martha would have done are going to outshine that their deaths took place in this spot. And yes, eventually Park Row will outgrow the moniker of Crime Alley, and it's going to be re-nicknamed something more optimistic and positive and inspiring, maybe something like The Pathway to Help. But Bruce can't get any of the ball rolling for that stuff until he gets Wayne Enterprises back in order. And that means setting up a meeting with Lucius Fox. As mentioned before, some people in Wayne Enterprises are trying to muscle out Bruce from his position of power, and he hasn't been seen in all these years, but Lucius was the only other person besides Alfred that Bruce had some means of contact with. And in these 8 years, but also dating back to even before that, when Bruce was just a kid and he wasn't really interested in, trying to run a company, and nobody would have let him anyway, because, let's face it, a kid's not going to control this company. Lucius was the main trusted contact within Wayne Enterprises that Thomas and Martha spoke really highly of, and somebody that Bruce was using as a surrogate business partner. Kind of like how somebody would treat their accountant if they had one, but in a much more complicated and deeper way. From the start, they've had a pretty interesting relationship, and there's a difference between the way Bruce talks to Alfred versus Leslie Tompkins or Jim Gordon or Lucius Fox. When it comes to Alfred, he is most open with him because he is his closest father figure. And Leslie, as his best example of motherly presence, she's also able to get him to kind of act a little subordinate to and kind of open up a little bit and let his guard down. And with Gordon, he is very much the straight man to the Batman and playing off of that. They're kind of like two business partners, two like stern co-workers that are talking about the job all the time. And Bruce's vulnerability comes in when he is Bruce around Gordon, because that is sort of more of that authority figure in the teacher type role that I mentioned about Henry Ducard, where he can look up to him. But remember, when Bruce was a kid, Lucius was the only person who didn't talk down to Bruce. Lucius is smart, and he knows that Bruce is. Game recognizes game. He knows that Bruce has been up to some extracurricular activities these past few years while he's been away at college, but he has no real idea what any of this entails. As far as he's concerned, the less he knows, the better. I love the line from Batman Begins, where Morgan Freeman's version of Lucius Fox says, "Mr. Wayne, if you don't want to tell me exactly what you're doing, when I'm asked, I don't have to lie. But don't think of me as an idiot." And of course, Bruce doesn't. Everybody is comforting in some way, but Alfred is snarky, and Leslie is comforting, and Gordon is straightforward, and Lucius can be a bullshitter. The way that he and Bruce talk to each other is kind of like a game of wordplay. They're very good with metaphors, and they are very good at speaking in code to one another. So when Alfred sets up a secret meeting with Lucius, and suddenly this bearded and disheveled Bruce Wayne is standing in front of him, Lucius knows that it's game time. But again, what game are they playing? And for that matter, what's Fox's position on the field? Lucius asks, in broad terms, what are we doing here? And Bruce says, if anybody ever asks you, just tell them that we're making Gotham a better place. Wink. And since Lucius holds Thomas and Martha at such high regard, and he knows that Bruce is intelligent and he was a good kid, he could assume he's still a good man, he's willing to honor that legacy and that memory and watch over the company and Thomas and Martha's son, and bet that Bruce isn't up to something that he would disagree with. Lucius has a wife and a couple of kids. He really wants Gotham to be a better place too. Over these past few years, Bruce has built a backdoor access into Wayne Industries' databases. He's been researching a lot of different technologies that were put in various states of production over the years, and methodically messing with the servers. By now, there's a whole subdivision that's off the books, tucked away far deeper than anybody's ever going to be able to find, and Bruce has encrypted it like crazy, and filed it away under the name the Zeta Project. 10 points if you get that reference, and if you are catching all these things, then you are really going to love the rest of the Batman Blueprint, I swear. See, one of the things that I wanted to circumvent here is that it just doesn't make sense that Bruce is gone for a number of years, and then he comes back to Gotham, and over the course of a few weeks, he's able to gather all the equipment from nothing, and get the Batmobile all sorted out, get the suit all sorted out. The Batman shows up right at the same time as Bruce Wayne does, and all this Wayne Enterprises equipment just conveniently went missing. It's a little too obvious, so instead, I want the Wayne Enterprises equipment to be missing from a long time ago. He's been collecting that for 8 years, and that makes it a lot more reasonable why people just don't realize why the materials are missing right when the Batman shows up. Plus, over these 8 years, there's been a lot of corruption in Wayne Enterprises, so people aren't paying attention to a lot of that stuff anyway. Once Bruce comes, then suddenly people are going to be paying a little bit more attention. Bruce, Alfred, and Lucius catch up, and Bruce gives Lucius a little bit of information, but not many specific details, because he wants to maintain that level of plausible deniability. And together, they all head over to the storage facility that Lucius has been keeping all of the stuff that Bruce has siphoned away over the years. Batman has a ton of gadgets, as I'm sure that you're well aware, but at this particular time, he's not going to prioritize something like the shark repellent. We're going to start off with the basics, and then we've got 95 more chapters where he can acquire more stuff. Before Bruce takes, he's going to give Lucius some samples of the flowers and the Lazarus Pit chemicals and everything that he's gathered over the past 8 years. He's taken 2 samples of each. One he's going to keep for himself, and he's going to put that in the Batcave laboratory. The other one he's going to give to Lucius to hide away in Wayne Industries and use that in the future for Wayne Botanical and Wayne Pharmaceutical, because Lucius is going to be needed to help create mass doses of antidotes for Scarecrow's fear toxin and such. And that includes also the Viper formula, which, of course, I mentioned before, Bruce is going to be using for healing ointments and, try to make sure that he's not this super scarred mass of a human in no time. Side note, anytime that he does have any kind of like a black eye or a new scar or anything along those lines, they're always just going to play it off as, some extreme sports accident of being a careless playboy. Now let's talk about the toys. The Batsuit is a tactical body armor that would put any bulletproof vest or SWAT gear to shame. It's a complicated weave of materials like graphene, Kevlar, Nomex, polyethylene, Dyneema, and spider silk. And since it has a mesh of dragon skin style ceramic and steel plating, the texture of it is sort of like a miniature animal scale rather than a smooth manufactured surface. If you were to touch it, it has the feel of kind of skin, but also steel wool. I want it to feel and to look like it could actually be this horrifying creature's skin, but not look like it's skin, you know what I mean? The center plate right here is a bat logo, and it is the most reinforced section that is statistically where most people would point and shoot a gun anyway. It's also a reference to Bruce clutching his heart at the beginning with chapter 1. But the logo is there in part to try to draw attention away from the face, not only for people to not look at the face, where, he is very clearly a human, but also so they don't, shoot his face. The whole suit's fireproof and bulletproof and virtually indestructible to fictional levels, and it is all color-wise black and dark gray. This is not a blue and yellow outfit because he needs to be able to blend into the shadows, and it would be ridiculous to see Batman in some of the costumes that we've seen him in the comics. And this is not at all spandex. My Batman does not wear tights with underwear on top and a flammable cotton cape, and he doesn't have a rubber mask that he can just peel off like Michael Keaton in Batman Returns. Rather, the Bat Cowl is more of a helmet, and it is a much sleeker design than what the Mask of Tengu was that he was wearing, but it is inspired by that, and it is made out of carbon nanotube fibers, among other things. It has an electrical system with a set of communications that are built in as a sophisticated headset, and the ears aren't just completely visual for fashion purposes, they are also acting as antennae. The eye holes can be opened so you can see Bruce's eyes, or these little visors can pop down, which have a heads-up display that has everything from thermal imaging to night vision. And for anybody that's looking at Batman, it's going to seem like Batman has these glowing white eyes. Now that's also going to help very well with the intimidation factor, because it is a lot scarier to see something coming at you looking like this rather than something like this. There's also a built-in voice modulator because I don't want Batman to growl, and I don't want anybody to be able to recognize Bruce's voice or be able to record it and to put that into a system and figure out that that's Bruce. Plus, with the voice modulator, the little microphone and the speaker that's in there, he can increase this to like a megaphone and have a more booming voice for trying to catch people's attention and also trying to intimidate them. And here's where all that code talk comes into play between Bruce and Lucius. Bruce acquires this glider material for his suit's cape and wings, and it is this experimental parachute technology called Sylph. It's a high-tech micro-thin miracle fiber created by Sylvan Schofield. The grappling hook and gun, well, that's spelunking equipment. The classic utility belt is here. Now, I've never really understood how anything's supposed to fit in those compartments, but this is fake, so who cares? The gloves have all sorts of neat little tricks and secrets to them. Some of them have built-in brass knuckles, some of them are actually electrified. And there are also these crates of these assorted metal shurikens and these boomerangs that have been fashioned into the shape of a bat logo. And Alfred is going to snarkily refer to them as batarangs. Bruce, for that matter, is not going to name any of his stuff Bat something. The car, for instance, is only going to be called the Batmobile by the public once they see it. Bruce isn't calling up Lucius and going, hey, did you set aside that Batmobile that I requested? Because that's kind of ridiculous. And it's actually Dick Grayson that's going to be the one that starts calling everything the Bat computer and the Bat plane and all, just to be funny. He's going to make jokes like, are you going to have a Bat sandwich for lunch today? Oh, and speaking about the Batmobile, it is in no way just a Mustang or a Cadillac or something. Bruce will have a souped-up muscle car like Robert Pattinson's version of the Batmobile, but he is going to have a whole collection of regular cars for different purposes. Fancy sports cars, a Rolls Royce, a Jeeps, whatever, you name it. But those aren't the Batmobile. For that, I picture something more like a retrofitted all-terrain tank, but not to the level of what the Tumbler is, or God forbid the ones from Dark Knight Returns, because that thing's a monstrosity. I prefer something more like the one we got in Arkham Knight, or the Zack Snyder version of it, or Batman the Animated Series, or something maybe kind of like this design that I saw on DeviantArt, but with some, more tank elements to it. So that means no bubble domes, no fluorescent lights, no big useless wings to it. And Bruce is also going to have the Bat Cycle bike, because of course motorcycles are more useful in certain situations. And of course he's going to have, regular motorcycles as well. The normal bikes and cars are going to be maintained by an auto shop mechanic named Earl Cooper. The Batmobile is designed by a man named Jack Edison. He has since passed away, so we don't have to worry about him spilling the beans about recognizing his design and his creation. The technician who will be working on it in the future is a man named, or at least nicknamed, Mr. Fix-It. His name is Harold Allnut, and he is a hunchback who I don't really need to get into right now. And while Bruce was able to hack into the Wayne Enterprises database with just a regular computer, the Batcave is going to have a state-of-the-art quantum computer. That's the Bat computer, as everybody's aware. Now, this computer network is far more complicated than anything that you and I have, and it's going to have things that turn into stuff like the Oracle Artificial Intelligence System. It's going to have the Dave system, the Digitally Advanced Villain Emulator. Now, these are robotic drones that he's going to program with the brainwaves of his future enemies and use as like a training simulator, especially for somebody like Dick Grayson or Barbara Gordon or Jason Todd or Tim Drake or Damian Wayne or, any of the other subordinates. And he's also going to be creating a solar energy grid throughout the city. Now, this thing is going to provide both free Wi-Fi and extra security cameras to the citizens of Gotham, but he's also going to be using this to secretly hack into the cameras for surveillance purposes. Now, this system is my hybrid of the Witch's Eye, which is a digital mapping drone, as well as the Batwave from that cartoon series. It's like a signal rerouter of sorts, which can tap into different radio frequencies and everything. And it's also going to be that cell phone sonar frequency from The Dark Knight. Oh, and also for the record, he's going to put some ultrasonic deterrents in the Batcave to keep the bats from shitting everywhere. So all this equipment is in his possession now, but one thing that isn't is Wayne Enterprises itself. And he can't really do anything about that as a vagrant hiding in the shadows. He has to step into the light. And that means that it's time for Bruce Wayne to officially and publicly return to Gotham. Having a back channel into the company's database is one thing. Having public control as the figurehead of Wayne Enterprises is something else entirely. And since Bruce knows that there are these conspirators within the company who wouldn't want to see him return at all, and they want to liquidate his share of the stocks and everything, he doesn't want to give them any time to react. He understands that, as he's learned, the element of surprise is supremely beneficial. So a few days later, everybody that's on the board of directors is gathered together for an emergency meeting, and they don't know who summoned them or why. They all just speculate and assume that this is probably Mr. William Earl. You know, he is the current CEO, and he's also, by the way, the biggest hurdle to overcome because he is the most corrupt out of all of them. You know, that's how he's able to ascend to the top of the company. And he's far from the only hurdle. I mean, Bruce has got a lot of people that he's going to have to clean up on the bad side. There's Crowley, there's Molly Mathis, who made her name through the corrupt Wellzine part of the Wayne Pharmaceuticals branch. There's Director of Physical Operations Sid Bunderslaw. There's Roland Charles of Biotech, and maybe we throw in Donovan Lumos and G. Glenn Godfrey and maybe some other names. Thankfully, though, there are people on the pro-Bruce side and good people that are on the board of directors. And we have Lucius Fox. He is the Vice President of Research and Development, as well as Douglas Fredericks. I mentioned him before. There's Director of Wayne Financial, Jack O'Dwyer, Regina Zellerbach, Arthur Cranston, maybe Felipe Ehrenreich, etc. So when even Mr. Earl is asking, what the hell is this meeting all about? They go into the conference room, and there at the table, maybe sitting down with his feet up or something, I don't know, is Bruce Wayne. And he is clean-shaven, pristine haircut, wearing a suit that's more expensive than your car. And they're in total shock and all. What the hell? And nobody knows what to say, but Mr. Earl has a Freudian slip of the tongue, and he just says, Bruce, I thought that you were dead. Bruce says, sorry to disappoint. They're of course all wondering, what are you doing here? What is all this? You know, where have you been? And Bruce motions for them to look over to the projector screen for a video that he thinks will sum it up the best. So they watch this presentation that Bruce has prepared, and it is one of those schlocky, stereotypical, overproduced company shill commercials with the, you know, stock images of like a happy, smiling family with their dog in the park, or, you know, the hopeful, inspiring, royalty-free music and all that hokey stuff. Wayne Enterprises has been a trusted name for centuries, but we can do better. Every one of our branches, from the ground floor of Wayne Mining to across the seas with Wayne Shipping to the limitless skies of Wayne Aerospace, are multi-billion-dollar successes. But we can do better. Starting immediately, there will be renewed efforts in giving back to our home of Gotham City and to make the world as a whole a better place. Because we can do better. We at Wayne Foods can provide healthier products at a cheaper cost. We at Wayne Financial will help provide jobs to offset this struggling economy. We at Wayne Construction will rebuild our broken city brick by brick. We at Wayne Tech will produce state-of-the-art electronics that will bring the future to us. Right now, we can be at the forefront to find better ways to solve the energy crisis and global warming. We at the Wayne Institution can provide more scholarships to help fund our school systems for the betterment of the children of tomorrow, because the children are our future. Hi there, I'm Bruce Wayne, majority shareholder and the heir apparent to the throne that is Wayne Enterprises. I've spent the last 8 years traveling the world, learning from the best teachers in every field possible, researching how to make my company the very best. Now, it's time to put the Wayne back in Wayne Enterprises. But this has never solely been about me or my parents, but my family. And all of you are my family too. Because here at Wayne Enterprises, we are here for you. The board of directors is stunned. They are just scratching their heads. Some of them want to cheer, and some of them want to jump over the table and immediately strangle him. Who said that you had the right to come here and to do all of this? None of us were consulted. There needs to be a vote for these sort of things. And Bruce says that what matters most is the vote of public opinion, and he is more concerned with what the shareholders and the citizens have to say than the people that are sitting there at this table, with no disrespect. And when Mr. Earl says, well, they're not going to have anything to say because this ploy to take over stops right here, right now, and none of this nonsense is ever going to get out of this room, everybody's phone starts to buzz. Bruce says, well, that's the thing. It kind of already has. I uploaded all of this to all of our social media accounts live the moment that you step through the door before we started talking. So let's see what the public has to say, and we will reconvene and talk soon about everybody's job security. And in the meantime, if anybody has any game-changing ideas or strategies of how to implement all this stuff, maybe something that I haven't really thought about yet, then you can find me in my office. Oh, and by the way, who do I talk to about sorting out getting my office put together? I was kind of hoping for a big one with a nice view, kind of like yours, Mr. Earl. And remember, Mr. Earl, facetiously had said to Bruce, when you're ready to take over the company, we'll be waiting for you. Bruce is ready to take over the company, and Mr. Earl, not having it. A well-placed tip to the media that went out at the same time makes this an even bigger deal and gives it enormous coverage. Bruce Wayne, the Prince of Gotham, has returned, and people's brains are melting. By the time Bruce leaves Wayne Tower, it is surrounded by paparazzi, and they're also waiting for him outside the gates of Wayne Manor. And to keep up with this media cycle, you can be damn sure that they are going to rerun their Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous documentary that they did for stately Wayne Manor. And Alfred's looking at all these people around, and he says, well, it's nice to know that they haven't forgotten about you, right? And Bruce, typically stoic and, his broody self, he just pushes through and says, yes, Alfred, it's good for the mission. People are reeling from this revelation. Anybody who has any connection to any of the Wayne businesses is double checking their stock options, and there's all this hubbub about this coup to take over, which naturally is going to be met with at least some backlash, and that's just one of the risks, and Bruce understands that, but he also understands that maybe there's going to be some people that are willing to put a hit out on him. There's a lot of money at stake here. But at the very least, the good thing is that he can defend himself a lot better than his parents ever could. But what Bruce doesn't know is that, rest assured, somewhere in the city, the Court of Owls is having a meeting, and they are discussing what all this means and how Bruce can potentially screw up their plans. We're going to put them on hold for now. And then there's the society aspect to all this. Billionaire playboy Bruce Wayne is back in the public eye, and he's even more handsome than he was before, and all the things that he said during that promotional spot has his approval rating through the roof, and people are admiring how he seems like the type of guy who will take charge, and they find that very refreshing. It's all very sexy, and it's all that the media outlets can talk about, for better or worse. The gossip columns are, of course, running rampant with all sorts of different total fabrications, as always, but there are also some very good reporters that are out there that are trying to get the real scoop of what's going on. These are people like Jack Ryder, Summer Gleason, Vicky Vale. So everyone is reaching out to Bruce, be it the press, business executives, old friends, acquaintances that he was never close to begin with. And he's not dealing with any of them, in part because he just doesn't want to, and partially because he's using this time to work on some business stuff and to put the finishing touches on all his gear and to get accustomed to his armor and such. But don't worry, there's going to be a massive party in a few days, and it's going to be just like the good old days. When Thomas and Martha would throw these big bashes at Wayne Manor, they were epic, and this celebration of Bruce's return is going to top all of those. Anyone who's anyone is going to be there. It's the social event of the decade. I wonder if that Ice Princess is going to be there. Somebody should do a report on that for the news. Alfred tries to lay out his suit again, give him some suggestions of some attire to wear. But Bruce is visibly uncomfortable. And he says that putting on this mask is going to be one of the hardest parts of the mission. So finally, we can talk about the four corners of our protagonist. I've wanted to talk about this for a while, but I had to wait until this moment. Because in my mind, there are four different sides to this man. At his core, there's Bruce Wayne. This is the child that we saw and the most important version of himself. It's who he is deep down before any of this tragedy befell him. The one that misses his parents and doesn't open up to anybody, save for Alfred sometimes. Then there's the Bat, aka future Batman, who is this gruff exterior that Bruce shows to the world when he's fighting crime and getting his hands dirty and all. This is the one that was training with the League of Shadows and such, going out on those missions, and it is the most prominent driving force of his personality, at least now. He considers himself more of the Bat than Bruce Wayne. Bruce Wayne died when he was 8 years old. More on that later. Then there's Mr. Wayne, the executive, intelligent businessman from that commercial. And finally, Brucey. This is the billionaire playboy character that he's portraying to the public as a total himbo. You know, if he's this super rich, super smart, super fit, mysterious businessman, it's more suspicious that he could potentially be the Batman. But when he puts out this perception that he's actually a total drunk and a player who is more concerned about nailing supermodels left and right, and kind of an idiot sometimes, or at least a little blissfully ignorant, then not only is he going to fit in better with the trust fund babies who can't do anything for themselves and are living off their family money so he can better infiltrate those social circles, he's also just going to make it a lot easier for everybody to think, well, come on, he can't possibly be Batman. This guy was probably off having orgies in Bahamas every day for the past 8 years. Clearly, the real people that are running the show behind the scenes at Wayne Enterprises are the professionals and the businessmen. And Bruce is just this puppet figurehead that they trot out to the public because he's the face of the company, and he's handsome, and he's a Wayne. So I'm smart. I know the real truth. That's how they get you. So this is a mask that Bruce is putting on, and for all intents and purposes, the tuxedo is the equivalent of the Batsuit. And when the time comes for the party, he has to turn on that charm and that aloof behavior to the max to really set the precedent for what's going to carry over for the next few years. It's time to make another first impression in a sense. What do people in this position normally do? Well, date movie stars or buy things that aren't for sale, and go on extravagant trips when they're bored, and do things like windsurfing just to get a really good picture for their Instagram. Total fanfare at the party. There's all these influencers trying to get selfies with Bruce. All these business people are going up to him trying to introduce themselves and pitch their great new ideas to be a part of the Wayne family and all this, trying to, copy what he said in the promotional video, and blah, blah, blah. It is a miserable time for him. And most of us, if we're in that situation, we would be rolling our eyes, but the social elite, they eat this shit up. This is their comfort zone. Yeesh. Picture conversations like this. Bruce has these two beautiful European women by his side named Kiki and Susie. They are the two women that were swimming in the fountain in Puccio's in the Batman Begins scene. In my blueprint, they're escorts that he hired. And while he's got them, one arm and the other arm, he's saying things to people like, oh, while I was gone, I studied abroad. Or two. That disgusting type of behavior. And these bigwigs that are filthy rich and morally bankrupt, they think that Bruce is fucking best. Some of his old friends are there too, including Silver St. Cloud, and she can immediately tell that he's changed and she doesn't like this version of him. Tommy Elliott doesn't show up, and Silver makes up an excuse for him not to be there, but she says, hey, by the way, did you know what happened while you were gone? His parents died. It's an awful tragedy. There was this car accident, and it was just absolutely terrible. Side note, Tommy's always been jealous of Bruce, remember? And he actually orchestrated this car accident so that he could be just like Bruce and become an orphan, because everybody doted on Bruce the orphan, and of course it doesn't work out for him, so that makes him resent Bruce even more. Another childhood friend, if you would call him that, that's also there is Roman Sionis with his girlfriend Tiffany Ambrose. Now, Roman's become a real piece of garbage, and for anybody who doesn't know, he's not too long off from becoming Black Mask. It's another parallel of the masks that we wear in public and the ones that we wear behind closed doors. A lot more on that later in future chapters, not quite for right now. Bruce doesn't have to keep the act up for absolutely everybody though, because another person that he has invited is Leslie Tompkins. And they have this very nice chat about catching up, are you healthy? How have you been? What have you been up to? Etc. And Leslie asks, well, have you been keeping up with your journaling exercises? And Bruce says, yeah, I've been writing in my journal all the time. That coded journal that he has been keeping records in for the past few years, the one that's going to become the Wayne Foundation Archives kind of basis, that is actually quite literally a book labeled How to Move On. And it is a thing that Leslie gave him with the intention for him to write down his feelings. He's turned what was supposed to be a therapy tool into the notebook of the mission. Not exactly what Leslie had in mind. But hey, look who else is here. It's Harvey Dent, handsome old Apollo. Man, we all knew that he was going to be successful, and buddy old pal is fresh off the campaign trail. He's becoming district attorney. Crazy, right, how these things work out. So let's catch up and have a couple of drinks. Or more so, as we've established, Harvey is going to have a couple of drinks, and Bruce is going to pretend to have a couple of drinks and put on the act that he is an irresponsible lush. Harvey always did have a knack to be a bad influence every once in a while. And eventually Bruce wants to take his leave of Harvey and tend to some other matters, but Harvey's egging him on, just keep drinking, just one more drink, just one more drink. And he says, tell you what, we'll flip a coin. If I get my way, you have to have another drink. And if you get your way, then you get to go leave me again. Bruce says, fine, I call heads. And of course we know that it's going to land on heads because it's a trick coin, both sides are heads, but Harvey's just a little too buzzed to realize that he's been hoodwinked in his own setup game. And Harvey says, hey, don't make it another 8 years before I see you again. I missed this face. And he taps him on the side, a little foreshadowing of the one side, and he's off to go mingle and drink with somebody else. But Bruce notices somebody else that he wants to talk to. Jim Gordon, who looks horribly uncomfortable because of how out of place that he is. Bruce goes up to him, puts his hand out for a handshake, and he says, I wasn't sure that you were going to come, Sergeant. And Gordon corrects him, it's Lieutenant now. Bruce says, oh wow, that's really great to hear. Gordon says, yeah, well, enough time goes by, they either have to promote me or kill me, and I'm still standing, although I'm not really sure that I'm supposed to be standing here. And Bruce says, I'm glad that you are, truly. Gordon says, I was surprised about the invitation. I didn't even think that you'd remember me after all these years. And Bruce says, I couldn't possibly forget. So there are two things that Bruce does that really seals the deal when it comes to this Brucey playboy persona. It was a little nickname that he had when he was a kid. It's just one of those things you're going to hear all these socialites just be like, Brucey, that kind of thing. So first is that later on in the night, he gives a toast and he pretends to be blitzed drunk. So he grabs another champagne glass and he goes, a lot of people have been coming up to me tonight and saying that you've been gone for so long, Bruce, that we don't even know who you are anymore. And I'd say to those people, well, I am back. I'm the guy who bought all the booze that you're all drinking tonight. Never the cheap stuff. Great. I'm sure my dad said that at some point to some of you. I don't know. Maybe. This guy knows what I'm talking about. I am all of this. I am my parents' son. I am Wayne Enterprises. I am Bruce fucking Wayne, baby. Woo! And he takes another bottle of champagne, pops it, it goes flying all over the place. And half the crowd is snickering, looking down on him. The other half of the crowd, though, is loving it. They are just like, hell yeah, man, what a fucking legend. The other piece de resistance, he sleeps with a woman from the party named Vesper Fairchild. She is a popular radio host of a program called Siren of the Night. And not only is she very attractive, which furthers the narrative that he is somebody who is a ladies' man, who's always more concerned with chasing tail. Naturally, it's also just, look, having sex with a beautiful woman is not the most painful part of the mission. It's not like he's going through the fear trials again. But most importantly and strategically, because this isn't a situation where he's looking for love, Bruce knows that she is a gossip hound. There's no way that she isn't going to talk about this on her show and get all the details out there about the party to all the people who weren't invited. She'll spill the beans about this affair the moment that she's live on the air tomorrow evening. Great publicity. It's a good thing Brucey isn't who Bruce really is. And once all the guests have left the party and it's just him and Alfred left in this quiet, lonely fortress, soon enough, it's going to be time for Bruce to take off this mask and put on his real face. A few more days, maybe even weeks, have gone by, and Bruce is now comfortable with all of this gear. After listening in on the rudimentary form of the Batwave transponder, it's not fully set up, but it's able to get the job done, Bruce catches wind and overhears that tonight there is going to be a drop-off of some kind at the docks. Why the docks? Well, I want to make up for Bruce stowing away on those ships and leaving Gotham. I want to have a redemption for his desertion. So he's gathering all his materials, and he's ready to go out for the first time as the Bat. And Alfred is there helping him out. And it's kind of like if you were to see a father help his son put on like his cleats and his helmet and his shoulder pads for his first ever football game, but of course in a dark and twisted kind of way. Alfred says, "It's funny, you loved playing cops and robbers as a kid, but you always wanted to be a robber. And I would just be casually dusting, and you would come up from behind me and pretend to stick me up, and we'd chase you through the house. Here we are." And Bruce, with his stoic and unfunny nature, he just says, "A lot's changed. Hand me those smoke pellets." Now, despite his cold demeanor, there is still warmth between the two of them. It's just in Bruce's special way of showing love from a distance. For example, Bruce has this set of profiles up on the computer screen right now, and it's mapping out all of this kind of Rolodex of allies and potential allies. Alfred is the centerpiece. He's kind of, in many ways, the centerpiece of Bruce's life. Lucius is there, and Leslie and Gordon have these little asterisks because they're not really brought on board yet, but they have potential to be a part of the inner circle. And off on the side, he has these other names like Harvey Dent, Harold Allnut, Earl Cooper, Henry Ducard, Ethan Bennett from that FBI training course that he befriended. And to honor Alfred as the first person that he really trusts to be on this crusade with him, and to reference his days in the Secret Service, Bruce is going to classify these people and call them the Outsiders, which is also my interpretation of that group name from the comics. Of course, the inside man of the Outsiders, Alfred, is already on board with the plan. But what about somebody like Gordon? Well, Bruce is about to go ask, but he can't do that as Bruce Wayne. That means it's time for him to put on the last piece of this armor. The cowl, the mask. And this is nothing like when they were on the plane or preparing for the party. There is so much more weight to this. Inherently, it could be kind of silly to watch somebody put on this costume, but the tension in the air is thick and the heaviness is palpable. This feels less like a college graduation with the cap and gown after all those years of training, and more like a ritual sacrifice is about to play out. It's more like a christening or a communion or a baptism. And it's horrifying and depressing and triumphant all at the same time. Because Alfred notices how much more comfortable Bruce is putting on this mask than the tuxedo. And Alfred can't help but to shed a tear. You know, he didn't want any of this for Bruce. And all the pain that Bruce has gone through, and all the pain that he's going to go through, well, Bruce just says, "I am pain." And the helmet clasps on, and from this moment onward, Bruce is no longer just himself. He has been knighted the Dark Knight. Lieutenant Gordon is in his office. There's a thunderstorm outside. The rain hasn't started to fall, but you can smell it and feel it in the air, and you can hear clasps of thunder and flashes of bright lightning. But what Gordon didn't feel is the presence of somebody entering his office and appearing behind him and holding what feels like a gun up to him, like a robbery. Bruce still has that in him. So Gordon freezes up, and he's assuming that he is going to have a bullet put in him. But he hears a voice, and it's Bruce saying,
"Don't turn around. The drop-off happening tonight at the docks. How many cops are on the case?"
On the record, none. Off the record, Falcone usually has 2 people in his pocket to be on the lookout in case something goes wrong.
Well, something's about to go wrong tonight, and it's only the beginning.
Is that so? Why are you telling me this?
Because I need to know for sure that you're going to follow through when I bring them in.
For sure?
You're a good cop. One of the few. I'd like to think I'm not wrong.
You got that right, I'm a damn good cop. So what's to stop me from arresting you right now?
Because we're on the same side. I'm just someone trying to clean up the city, like you.
Like me, huh? I've got a badge. I'm behind a desk. You're behind me with a gun in the back of a police officer. You're broken into my office.
I don't use guns.
And he lays down next to Gordon a stapler that he was using. Gordon keeps his eyes forward and he just lets out a, So you're a comedian.
Kind of the polar opposite.
But I'm supposed to take this as a sign that you're on my side of the law.
I'm not the law, but I am justice.
No, you're crazy. Just one man against the mob?
Now we're two.
Fair fight, huh? Taoism, you got two cops that are on the take in that black side of it. They're supposed to be good, not quite in the gray area. Then you got Bruce as the Batman, as a vigilante in that kind of grayish area into the white light. And of course, Gordon firmly in the white light. Kind of a balancing act.
If you're my backup, we can do this together.
We? So, partner, what are we going to do?
Just be at the docks by 11 and be ready. You need to see this. And remember, you're not alone, Jim.
Of course, referencing the whole you don't need to see this and the I need to see this stuff from chapters 1 and 2. Gordon asks, first name basis. Who are you exactly? No response. A moment later, Gordon gets the sense that he can safely turn around now, so he reaches for his gun and he turns around and nobody's there. This is the first of many times that Bruce is going to pull the disappearing act on Gordon. And Jim's left wondering, what the hell just happened here? But after taking another moment to ponder, he looks down at his watch. And the rain starts coming down outside. A group of scumbag criminals are at the docks for the drop-off, flanked by their two paid-off cops that are there for protection purposes. At this stage of the Batman blueprint and the creative process, I'm currently planning on these two being Lieutenant Max Eckhart from Tim Burton's Batman and Rich Jordan Reynolds. Some of the goons that work for Falcone, there's roughly a dozen or so of them, are Nick and Eddie from Batman 89, along with the crew from Batman Begins that are upgraded a bit. There's Stice and bigger Charles Melvin, and a guy named Jimmy who is being combined now with a character from Gotham who is a high-ranking underboss named Jimmy Saviano. And while he's overseeing this operation and he's kind of in control of this process, he's also accompanied by his second in command, the underboss to the underboss, named Janacek. The Bat is surveying the scene from high on a rooftop nearby, and a few streets away or so is Gordon in his squad car, wondering nervously what's about to go down. And as these crooks are moving around these containers of contraband, one of these guys suddenly lets out a yelp and is taken out of the frame. The other guys are wondering what the hell that noise was, so one of them goes to check it out, and then whoosh, he's gone too. And he's left behind no trace other than his gun on the ground and another muffled yell drowned out by the rainfall. Two guys cock their guns and they go to check it out, real serious business. And the rest of them expect to hear maybe a gunshot from somebody trying to steal the shipment or something. But instead they hear two metal clunks as these two goons have their heads rammed into a shipping container and they're knocked out cold. The next guy actually gets a glimpse of his attacker, just barely. A black shadowy mass comes out of nowhere from the darkness and rushes at him from above. He yells out, fires his gun to no avail. That guy's out too. Everyone's on high alert now. The Bat continues to take them out, one by one. And all they can do is fire off their bullets into nothingness. This is straight up horror movie stuff. It's like a demon is coming after them, like the devil himself is snatching them out of darkness and dragging them down to hell. At best, they catch these quick glimpses of this horrifying creature, this man-turned-beast. And one of them yells out, "Who are you?" And then they hear this ominous, booming, monstrous voice. A mantra that sounds like it's coming from all directions surrounding them.
I am the shadows.
Bruce takes another one of them down.
I am vengeance.
Another one of them goes down.
I am the night.
Another one of them goes down. And then Saviano, stunned with shock, paralyzed with fear, finds himself face to face staring into the abyss as Bruce says back to him,
I am Batman.
The screams echo in the distance, and eventually the gunshots stop. By now, Gordon has made his way to the scene, and he's calling it in for backup. And when he arrives on the scene, he sees both the cops and Saviano, Janacek, all the goons, all zip-tied. And if they're not knocked out cold, they are rambling like lunatics in a crazed state about how the Batman is going to get them. Jim looks around and he sees out of the corner of his eye this bat creature in the distance, this Batman. He says to himself, what the hell? And within the blink of an eye, Batman's gone. Gordon's walkie-talkie fires up.
Gordon, are you sure you want us to head down to the docks tonight?
Gordon responds, I said all units respond now. Get somebody down here. You're not going to believe this. This is huge. 2 cops have been caught acting and abating mobsters that have direct ties to Falcone. And all that illegal stuff is right out in the open. Gordon thinks maybe this will stick this time. But at least one thing's for sure. Unfortunately for the criminals in Gotham, they've got a bat problem. It's officially past midnight and into the next day. As dawn approaches, the thunderstorm begins to fade and the rain stops falling. The storm is clearing up, slowly. The shadows begin to recede into the comforting morning light. Perched atop Wayne Tower, overlooking his city, is its watchful Gotham Guardian. Now, as far as the next sighting of the Batman, well, that is a nighttime story for another day. Thank you so much for following this series on YouTube. Even though this isn't the end game of the Batman Blueprint, I want you to know that these videos are still extremely important to me. They are among the favorite things that I have ever done. And while this is the end of me doing these particular narrative breakdowns on this channel of the Batman epic, trust me when I say that the Batman A Nighttime Story does not end here. This is quite literally only the beginning, as these 5 chapters that we've been talking about are just the launching point to set up the other 95 tales to tell. And those are going to span from Gotham's reaction to the first reports of this mysterious Batman, to building the legend of the Caped Crusader and Dark Knight myths, to the expansion of the team with the Robins and Batgirl, the transition from pure mobsters to people like the Penguin, to more colorful characters like Joker, Riddler, Clayface, even Crazy Quilt is in this. We've got Retaliation from the League of Shadows. We've got the Nightfall Saga, Bane, Red Hood, Harley Quinn, Deathstroke, Catwoman, Spiral, Two-Face, Hush, Batman Incorporated, and so much more. So as I've always mentioned, if you want more of this, hit the like button on this video, drop a comment below, let me know what you think. Whether it's good or bad, constructive criticism is, of course, very much welcome. And make sure that you are subscribed to this channel, because not only is there potentially maybe more to talk about with the Batman Blueprint, but there are other Blueprint projects, as I mentioned before: Power Rangers, James Bond, Terminator, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, so on and so forth. But more importantly than anything else, help me spread the word. Share these videos on all your social media platforms. Post on every message board and subreddit that's out there. Pass this along on Facebook to your friends and family. post something on TikTok or Instagram, you have my permission to take a clip of this and to react to it or something. Be sure to hop on Twitter and tweet out with the hashtags Batman Blueprint and Higher Mango DC Comics. Use them on TikTok and Instagram and all that stuff too. Make sure that you're tweeting out at accounts like at DC Official, at James Gunn, at the Batman account, at Batman, and anyone and everyone else. I mean, reach out to actors and artists and producers and other YouTube channels and so much more. Any more sets of eyes that you bring to this, I am greatly, greatly appreciative of. Because this is something that I am more passionate about than pretty much any other kind of creative endeavor of mine. And as I await, hopefully, some kind of message from DC about how they want to expand on this and produce it as, you know, a film series or graphic novels or animated show, whatever it might be, if you are just itching for more and you don't want me to stop talking about this on YouTube, then the best way that you can make that happen is to directly finance and sponsor the continuation of this series, or, you know, more about like Superman plans or Daredevil or whatever it might be. And you can do that by donating to the PayPal at the bottom of fanboysanonymous.com or subscribing to the Patreon at patreon.com/fanboysanonymous. I can't stress enough how passionate I am about the Blueprint project and the Batman Blueprint and how special that is to me. You know, it's the one that effectively started it all. And I really want to thank you for showing your support in whatever way that it is. And I hope that this is not the end. I am Tony Mango, and you can follow me on all the places that you can see on anthonymango.com. And I hope that you really enjoyed Volume 1, Chapter 5, Bat Out of Hell, and all the other chapters. And I hope to see you soon again with hopefully some very cool update. But in the meantime, take care and stay tuned. Same bat time, same bat channel.